She poisoned her ex-lovers like rats. She had plotted revenge for 20 years.
After celebrating Angel's Day, 5 girlfriends lost their hair.
In the Kyiv region, a woman who was poisoning men was detained.
My son suffered for 3 weeks. In what kind of agony? Terrible agony.
The suspect is under arrest without the right to post bail.
And then there were prizes with deadly poison.
The woman you see in the photo became known for her cruel revenge. Her former lovers, whom she dated 20 years ago. For this, the lady used all her creative potential, creating a scheme with fake raffles and lotteries. The victims supposedly won the gifts. The so-called winners picked up the deadly packages from the post office themselves. They had no idea that the contents were meant for only one thing: to kill. By the way, did you know that the percentage of female murderers, and more importantly, female serial killers, is only about 7 to 10% of the total number? That means the rest are men. And actually, for most female serial killers, interestingly, the motive is money. For men, the motive is usually sexual. And I'm not referring to rape. Basically, you can get similar statistics just by watching videos on my channel. The majority of the so-called heroes in these episodes are male. And of course, there are women too. In my opinion, these cases need special attention, not because they are common or regular, but rather because of their uniqueness. So, in this, let's say, subcategory of horror, she's a killer. I will be talking about exactly these kinds of cases. Not self-defense, not manslaughter, but about those few % of women who kill just to kill. There will also be monsters. In August, there will even be 2 whole episodes, so make yourselves comfortable, dear ones, because there will be more content. And that's scary. We all know people who love free stuff. Honestly, who doesn't like free things? Clothes or treats, anything you can describe with a simple word: freebie. Getting something for yourself without paying a single penny sounds pretty good, although it's a bit suspicious, you have to admit. After all, as they say, there's no such thing as a free lunch. That's exactly what Mr. Viktor from the town of Valentyn in the Kyiv region thought, when in August 2022 he received a package at the post office that he wasn't expecting at all. The sender was unknown, but Viktor's name and address were clearly on the box, so there was no mistake. This package was meant for him. Inside, Mr. Viktor found a bottle of cognac and chocolates. Viktor was pleasantly surprised. Maybe a friend or acquaintance did something nice for him. In short, the man thought that he had finally experienced that very same luck. But before trying the contents of the package, Viktor decided to call his ex-wife Inna. He and her had a friendly relationship. The woman lived in Fastiv, a different locality in the same region, so the former couple stayed in touch only by phone. In short, the man expressed his joy, surprised to receive something unexpected. Can you believe it? However, Inna was skeptical about the gift and even tried to persuade her ex not to drink that cognac. Who knows what could be wrong with it? Still, Viktor didn't really pay much attention to that. He was happy to receive such a surprise and had no intention of refusing it. He told Inna he wouldn't drink the cognac and would keep it as a memento, but that was just talk. After all, when Mr. Pan hung up the phone, he looked at the bottle for a while and decided that nothing bad would happen if he had just a little. It shouldn't be wasted, especially since it was free. So, Viktor opened the bottle and poured half a shot for himself. He felt nothing unusual. The cognac tasted normal. He hid the bottle and continued his business. However, the next morning he deeply regretted it. Not that he went about his business, but that he drank the cognac.
She came to my address under his name. He took the shot. I called him at work and he was vomiting. He was vomiting like that.
The man had all the symptoms of poisoning: vomiting, body pain. He couldn't believe that just half a shot of alcohol could do that to him. But the intoxication was extremely severe. Viktor survived only because the doctors intervened in time. And most likely compared to the relatively small amount of cognac he drank. Within days, the doctors had the man fully back on his feet. After recovering a bit, Viktor began to look for the reason for such a terrible package in his past. He didn't want to believe that someone had tried to poison him on purpose. However, he still made some assumptions. Suddenly, it could have been done intentionally. Moreover, he even had some ideas about who could have done it. However, for some reason, Viktor didn't share his assumptions with anyone. He even decided not to go to the police. The man dismissed his thoughts and carried on with his life, as they say. But the story with the poisonings didn't end there. In February of the next year, Ms. Inna, Viktor's ex, received a similar package.
Now everyone is on social media. I logged in and saw that someone had tagged me in some post. I see that a bottle of rum and 3 chocolate bars are being raffled. The contest rules were just to like that post and tag 6 people. Well, I liked it, and a couple of days later, I check and see that I'm among the winners. I was thrilled since I'd never won anything before. They wrote, "Please send us your information." I sent them my address. 2 days later, the package was already at my house.
Viktor's situation from 6 months ago was already forgotten. No one expected it could happen again, especially that it would be connected in any way. At least Mrs. Inna definitely didn't think about that. It seemed like just an ordinary giveaway on social media, which various stores usually run for advertising. Inna was pleasantly surprised to win a prize. That's all, nothing suspicious. Winning something is always nice, unless, of course, that something is made to kill you.
I'm taking out that bottle.
Was it nicely packed?
It had an excise stamp and was fully packed. I don't even know how it could have gotten there.
She didn't want to drink such a beverage alone without any reason, so she invited 4 of her girlfriends over. They planned the get-together for February 2nd, Inna's name day. When the group of girlfriends gathered, they all set the table together, sat and chatted, and shared that same gift rum among themselves. By the way, children were also at the table with the women and tried everything just like the adults. Except for the alcohol, of course, fortunately.
February 2nd is Inna's day. I'm Inna and decided to celebrate my name day with the girls. We had 15-gram shot glasses and 5 girls. I'm feeling sick. I'm so short of breath I can't breathe, and there's a burning feeling between my breasts. I think this is a heart attack. It must be my heart, or else why would my legs be numb? I called an ambulance, and the ambulance arrived. They gave me a couple of painkillers, and I felt better. I was curious myself about it. The 5 girls and I all stay in touch. I call and say, "We have Dasha there." I say, "Dash, are you feeling okay?" She says, "Something's wrong. My chest and stomach are numb, and my legs hurt." I reply, "Dasha, I feel the same." I say, "Something's wrong. We probably got poisoned."
The same symptoms appeared almost at the same time in all the women who drank the winning rum. Like Viktor, the victims got help at the hospital in time and were placed in intensive care immediately. However, by the time they were hospitalized, none of them could hardly walk anymore. Every movement caused terrible pain. Their limbs were literally going numb, and their hair was falling out in clumps. The poison was burning the women from within.
The next day after lunch, my palms and soles started to go numb. After that, closer to the evening towards night, the numbness spread up to my knees. The next day, my condition was much worse. My condition got worse because my whole body started to burn. It felt like I had been dipped in boiling water and then pulled out. All my skin was burning. After 5 days, my legs stopped working altogether. I couldn't stand on my feet. They just wouldn't support me. They had to wheel me around in a wheelchair. My lungs could hardly breathe, so they put me in intensive care so that medical procedures could be done to help me breathe. I could hardly breathe, and I couldn't eat either because my esophagus was burned.
They put me in intensive care and began asking questions. The first was, "In your hair?" Well, I just reached up once, and my hair stayed in my hands. My hair was just falling out in clumps.
My condition got worse on the 6th day. My legs hurt a lot, my heart was racing, and on the 7th day, my hair started to fall out. Somewhere around the 5th or 6th day, my hair started to fall out, but not significantly. It was just breaking off at the ends, that's all. The roots were intact. And then, around the 2nd week, my hair started falling out in clumps, right from the roots.
The doctors determined that the women had been poisoned with thallium, an incredibly rare and toxic substance that's actually not easy to get. And it's not just that it's unavailable to buy, legally or illegally. It's basically not produced as a separate substance at all. Thallium is widely used in metallurgy as an auxiliary substance for producing low-melting alloys, as well as in the nuclear industry. So, how this rare and deadly substance ended up in a completely sealed bottle of rum remained a complete mystery at that time.
Thallium is an extremely poisonous substance that has no smell or taste, and it can easily be introduced into food products by malicious individuals. And a person wouldn't feel that they ate or drank something wrong.
All 5 women went through real hell. They had to learn to walk again, coordinate their movements, and even form sentences. The only thing that saved them was that they drank together. So all that poison didn't go to just one person, but to 5. Fortunately, the women survived. And they have every chance to go through rehabilitation and return to a full life.
We walked between life and death for 3 weeks. Our rehabilitation will take, I don't know, from 3 to 6 months just to start walking again. We walk, but only for 3 to 5 minutes. My thoughts are jumbled. I can't form a thought. I lose words. Well, the consequences are very, very severe.
Viktor, the first victim, often visited his ex-wife in the hospital to check on her well-being and support her. The man thought that he was the poisoner's target this time as well, but by unfortunate coincidence, the package ended up with Inna. "I'm sorry that you drank what was meant for me." That's the message Viktor sent to all the affected women. Inna was troubled by her ex's thoughts. She couldn't accept the fact that someone had deliberately sent poison. Then Viktor told her about his thoughts on the matter. In fact, he already had a suspect. However, he didn't dare to report her.
She's my husband's former love, or I don't know, maybe they dated somewhere back in their youth.
Viktor's ex-lover was Olesya. However, it was hard to believe that she could be the one sending these deadly gifts. After all, the couple had dated quite a long time ago, 20 years ago to be exact. That was right after finishing school. At that time, the girl was 15 or 16 years old, and the boy was 18. It was just a typical teenage crush that never became more, and they didn't date long. And after that, they just went their separate ways, and that was it. They didn't communicate anymore. However, why did Viktor decide that it was Olesya who might be trying to poison him? I don't have an answer right now. Still, the idea of a poisoner didn't make things easier for the women. At the time, they didn't think much about it, focusing all their energy on a distant but highly desired recovery. Who knows? Maybe this case wouldn't have progressed at all without a single call to the Fastiv hospital. The call came from the hospital in Kyiv, where the victims were staying, to ask about cases of thallium poisoning, because a man with the same symptoms as Inna and her friends was admitted to their hospital. The only difference was that the man drank the rum by himself.
According to the toxicologist, we learned that there were similar cases of illness in another hospital in the Kyiv region, specifically in the Fastiv hospital. Also, through contacts with doctors, we found out that this was also a case of polyneuropathy. Also, after consuming alcohol, and it was specifically rum, and already at that point, in these patients from Fastiv, thallium was confirmed in their tests. And that's why we were more focused on this particular type of metal. And of course, first of all, I informed the hospital administration that there was such a case that required attention for examination and investigation.
So, an investigation was launched under Article 321 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine, sending poisoned or potent substances by a group of people. The victim in Kyiv was Mr. Valentyn, and as already mentioned, he was poisoned by rum. The scheme was much like the one we know. On February 13th, the man received a message saying that he had supposedly won alcohol and sweets in some kind of raffle. Valentyn hadn't applied to participate and hadn't even heard anything about this contest at all. Regardless, the package still arrived at the post office. The sender was unknown, but the man didn't refuse the free alcohol and sweets. Here's what Natalia, Valentyn's wife, said about this situation.
He says, I got a package from someone. Reply, how do you not know who sent it?
To the post office?
He shows me, and it says that your contact information was submitted by a friend to participate in a Valentine's Day giveaway. You will receive a bottle of a summer drink and some sweets.
Did you call that number?
Yes. We called, and it kept saying that it was out of service area. I got so worried, I immediately started calling his friends, asking who. Well, who provided the contacts? Everyone denies it, saying we didn't give them. I say, you know, Valik, that free cheese is only in a mousetrap.
The woman urged Valentyn to leave the package at the post office instead of picking it up. However, the temptation was too strong for Valentyn, so on February 19th he went to the post office and picked up his prize. There was a half-liter bottle of rum and some candies in the box. On February 21st, while his wife was at work on the night shift, Valentyn opened the bottle and had a few shots by himself. He started feeling sick almost immediately, but he just went to bed, hoping that it would somehow pass by morning. But the next morning, when he went to pick up his wife from work, he didn't feel any better. In fact, he felt even worse. He felt constantly nauseous, and his whole body ached as if he had spent the entire night doing some very intense physical exercises. Natalia had warned him about the package, but Valentyn didn't want to admit he opened the bottle and drank from it. However, his condition was getting worse by the minute. Even staying behind the wheel was unbearable and dangerous for him.
On the 21st, I was at work, and in the morning, he came to pick me up by car and said, "Natasha, I feel so bad. I probably won't go to work." I asked, "How bad is it?" And I saw that he really was unwell. So I got behind the wheel and we drove home. I questioned him like in an investigation. I said, "Sit down and tell me everything." I asked, "Do you want to live, Valik?" He said, "I do." "Where were you and with whom? Did anyone bring you anything? Or maybe you were somewhere, you know?" He got all flustered and brings me this bottle, puts it down. "This," he says, "is a package." I say, "What package? The one we talked about? The one you said you wouldn't pick up?"
But it was already too late to talk. The man needed urgent medical help. As before, his hands and feet went numb, and within days, Valentyn could hardly walk. After the man was hospitalized, doctors did all they could to remove the poison from his body. However, this task turned out to be far from easy. At that time, they still lacked exact information about the type of poison.
The patient's condition was deteriorating very quickly, and we couldn't help him anymore. After we received the laboratory test result for thallium, we saw that it was a very high concentration, and the patient was simply doomed.
The problem was that Valentyn drank too much of the poisonous alcohol himself, and accordingly he received a much higher dose of poison than Inna and her friends. So all the symptoms appeared in Valentyn much faster. The man's condition kept getting worse. Even after being admitted to Kyiv hospital, he didn't improve. Ms. Natalia, Valentyn's wife, did all she could to care for him in the hospital. She fought for his life until the end, pushing him in a wheelchair when he couldn't walk. However, the poisoning was already critical. Saving Valentyn's life required more drastic action. The man was transferred to a Kyiv hospital, where the doctors had slightly more resources. However, even there, they still failed to save the victim's life. 3 weeks after tasting the winning rum, Valentyn died at the age of 38. The autopsy report listed ischemic heart disease as the official cause of death. However, the blood analysis of the deceased put everything in its place. There was a massive dose of thallium in his body. And this left no doubt. The man had been deliberately poisoned.
Was his hair falling out too?
No. His hair only started to fall out when we brought him back and he was lying in the coffin. And in the places where the hair was falling out, necrosis was forming. And serous fluid was leaking from the dead body, so this poison was still eating away at him. He was dying in terrible agony.
Following Valentyn's death, the case was reclassified as premeditated murder under Article 115 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine. The investigation actively tried to track the deadly packages and find the sender. However, things were complicated because the packages were delivered to the post office by couriers, who were the only witnesses to see the perpetrator. The investigators were helped by the fact that Natalia voluntarily handed over her deceased husband's personal phone to a representative of law enforcement authorities. The acquisition gave the investigation new momentum. Now the police had access to all of Valentyn's contacts.
The Criminal Investigation Officers gradually began to establish all the details of these shipments. They found out that Nova Poshta was used through couriers. And during their interrogation, we found out that the couriers were assigned to meet on the streets in random places. But operational search measures and the study of technical information made it possible to obtain certain video materials where we saw a woman who, in both the first and second cases, sent such a package. At that time, we already received the tragic information that the man from Ivankivsky district had died from poisoning.
Valentyn's mother took the loss of her only son very hard. In her attempts to find the poisoner, the woman pointed to her son's ex-girlfriend, a person named Olesya. Valentyn dated her, believe it or not, 20 years ago when he was 18. The mother also claimed that back then, the young couple came to her asking for money for an abortion because the girl was pregnant and didn't want to give birth. This prompted investigators to visit Ivankivsky district where the last victim lived to speak with neighbors and relatives and uncover new details of the case.
Directly from the mother, they learned that about 20 years ago he had a relationship with a then young girl, but unfortunately their family life did not work out. She was even pregnant. But by mutual decision, the pregnancy was terminated.
So the investigation established that both Viktor and Valentyn had a relationship with the same girl named Olesya 20 years ago. And she became the main suspect in the case. In 2023, the woman lived in Kyiv and had worked for 4 or 5 years at a large computer equipment company. She had no family or children. Olesya was 35 then. After receiving all the necessary results from the examinations and analyses, the investigation decided to detain the main suspect and search her apartment. A lot of physical evidence was found in the woman's apartment, indicating her involvement in the crime. These included SIM cards, bottles of the same rum brand as the victims received, mobile phones, and chocolate bars. The investigation is still working to identify who helped the poisoner obtain the thallium and how. During the search and arrest, the woman remained silent. This is quite a standard practice for suspects because every word they say will be used against them by the prosecution. Olesya did not admit her guilt, nor her involvement in the case as a whole. The court imposed sanctions on her in the form of detention without the possibility of bail for the duration of the pre-trial investigation.
During the search, the suspect did not say a single word. She did not deny the details of the suspicion, even though it described step by step the preparation and commission of the murder, the poisoning of a person.
It's the fear that answering the question will lead to even bigger problems than he has now. This doesn't fully prove guilt. It could be due to fear or distrust, but generally it's the fear that I'll answer. And it'll get even worse.
It's important that right now that same Olesya is a suspect, which means her guilt hasn't been proven yet. Although the evidence clearly isn't in her favor. But what exactly happened 20 years ago? Who was Olesya in a relationship with? Because it turns out there's one time frame but 2 guys. Although if it seemed before that the story wasn't complicated enough, now I'm going to add another level of complexity. There were actually 3 guys. Here's how Valentyn's mother remembered those times.
She was dating the guys, you say. Were you familiar with them?
Well, one yes, one no. Later they said that it was Vitya.
Is that your roommate?
Yes.
So Valentyn, Olesya, and Viktor have known each other since school?
Maybe, I don't know, honestly.
So far it seems that way, right, Miss Katerina?
Yes, we live on the same street and they went to the same school.
And about the third one? What do you know about the third one after all?
Well, the third one is just a guy too.
And what was his name?
Sasha, I saw him with her.
So during this period, about a year after finishing 11th grade, Olesya was in relationships with 3 guys. The romance with Viktor ended quickly. He says he only walked her home a few times. Her relationship with Valentyn was deeper. As Valentyn's mother said, Olesya was pregnant by him but chose an abortion since she planned to study in Kyiv. It's not clear how the third relationship ended. There are many versions, so I'll just note that according to the investigation, they broke up calmly and without any scandals.
She had both at once. Either could walk her home. Well, Olesya, either one could. Then our neighbor shows up and says, I walked her home too. That was in 11th grade, where you could have a new love after every break.
She had an abortion and never had any more children. She was 15 years old. He loved her since they were young, but then he didn't marry her. That's how she got her revenge. On Valentine's Day.
Although Olesya herself did not say a word, neither in court nor outside of it, her lawyer occasionally relayed some testimony from the case. She said she doesn't recall any relationship with Viktor. She also firmly denied being pregnant or having an abortion while with Valentyn. Olesya's last boyfriend, Alexander, also had a brief relationship with her, and overall, no one knew much about them.
I think it was later, and after Valentyn. She was a bridesmaid at her friend's wedding. And then later she started dating Sasha, her friend's husband. This Sasha wasn't harmed.
Regarding wasn't harmed, that's very aptly said, because in the suspect's apartment, a fully packed parcel was also found with the same gift set we're already familiar with. A deadly set. If the task force had arrived a day later, this parcel would have already been sent to the likely recipient, Alexander. Neighbors in the building described Olesya as a quiet, calm person who never caused any trouble to the neighbors. Sometimes they noticed her with men, but that's all. No crime or anything even slightly suspicious. As for the motives of Ms. Olesya, there are currently two assumptions. The first is revenge for something that happened in the past. That is, back then, 20 years ago, these guys somehow offended the girl. They did something that became a trigger for revenge even after so many years. As for what exactly it could have been, we can only guess. After all, the men themselves don't talk about anything like that. And the suspect remains silent. She even denies knowing one of the victims at all. Another possible reason could be revenge for happiness, especially regarding family and marriage. All three men were either married at the time or had been married shortly before. At that time, Olesya had never been married or had children. The fact that the men she didn't have relationships with had both a wife and a family, and in her opinion, a pretty good life overall, could have been the very trigger. But that's just the investigator's assumption. I hope we'll see the case resolved soon and learn the whole truth, both about the killer and her motive. By the way, this case in Kyiv was not the first one involving thallium. At the end of the 1980s, the city was shocked by a high-profile case. The victims in it numbered in the dozens. And the killer there is also a woman, who by the way was the last woman sentenced to death in both the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics and Ukraine. There will be a separate episode about her. In any case, that case could have become, if not an example to follow, then at least a kind of distorted reference point for Olesya. After all, in fact, cases involving thallium can be counted on the fingers of one hand. So, I think the killer, if it was Olesya, at the very least knew about this case. About 4 years before these events in Kyiv, thallium poisoning cases had already occurred. One man died and 4 others were disabled, but the investigation found no link between the cases. Let me remind you, Olesya's guilt hasn't been proven in court and she's still just a suspect. According to Olesya's lawyer, she doesn't even know why the suspicion fell on her in the first place. I can only assume it's because the one thing all the poisoned people have in common is Ms. Olesya. Besides, let me remind you that physical evidence was found at her home, like that same rum and the sweets, which is at least highly suspicious in this situation. Is it possible to assume that the men did something truly terrible 20 years ago? Something so bad that it influenced Olesya's decision to kill them after all these years? Absolutely, that was my first thought. But then it's a bit unclear why the defense wouldn't present this information in court. As I see it, the only argument now is silence and denial, and the suspect faces up to 15 years in prison. If you wish, we can discuss the motives and the crime itself in the comments. As soon as new details in this case become known, or if a verdict is announced, I will definitely update the information in this video. Check the description occasionally. That's all for today, dear ones. See you in Monsters of Kyiv. Take care.